What would you think if I told you that some men test your loyalty, not with questions, but with silence, not with requests, but with distance? That when he withdraws, delays, or creates subtle storms in your connection, it's not always neglect, sometimes it's a crucible, a trial by fire for the woman he's trying to understand not just in body, but in soul. You see, the unconscious masculine, especially in its wounded, unintegrated form, often reaches for control. When intimacy begins to shake the foundations of his inner world, the man who's not yet made peace with his own shadow will not always ask for truth directly. He'll watch, he'll orchestrate, he'll test, because trust to him is not just given, it is proven through your reactions, your endurance, your ability to hold center while he dances around the edges of emotional withdrawal. This is not love in its highest form. No, this is love caught in the clutches of fear. Fear of betrayal, fear of engulfment, fear of the feminine storm he both craves and resents. And so he performs this unconscious ritual. He becomes distant, unclear, inconsistent. He creates silence and waits to see what rises in you. Will you crumble? Will you chase? Will you abandon yourself just to hold on to him? Because in his unconscious realm, loyalty equals safety. But the definition is corrupted. It's not loyalty as devotion, rooted in self-sovereignty. It's loyalty as endurance of emotional scarcity. And when you bend to prove your worth, you unknowingly confirm his deepest suspicions, that you can be manipulated, that love is something to extract rather than something to co-create. This is where the ancient feminine must rise, not as the pleading girl, but as the sovereign woman, the one who knows that love cannot be tested like a blade without dulling its edge, the one who understands that a man who needs to test your loyalty does not yet trust his own heart. She knows this, and yet it stings, because the modern woman, even in all her wisdom, still carries the ancestral ache of wanting to be chosen, of equating devotion with value. She's been conditioned to earn her place by holding on. Even when every nerve in her body whispers that something isn't right, she's told to be patient, to be kind, to understand what he's going through. But rarely is she told that she's allowed to walk away from what starves her. And so many women stay. They stay when he ghosts them for days, but returns as if nothing happened. They stay when he's emotionally absent but physically near. They stay when he accuses them of being too much, for simply needing clarity, affection, consistency. They stay, hoping that their steadfastness will earn his certainty. But loyalty, when demanded through confusion, is not a virtue. It is a form of self-betrayal. The testing man operates not from conscious malice, but from psychological wounding. Somewhere in his past, in a childhood marked by betrayal, in a first love marked by abandonment, a silent contract was made. Trust no one fully. And now, every woman becomes a mirror to that original pain. He needs to confirm that you'll stay despite the lack, that you'll chase him when he retreats, that you'll contort yourself to soothe a fear that never belonged to you. He doesn't know he's testing you, but you feel it. In your bones. You feel it when your intuition speaks louder than your logic, telling you that this emotional game is not love. It's a labyrinth. You feel it when the ache of his silence becomes louder than the sound of your own voice. You feel it when your nervous system begins to mistake anxiety for chemistry. And still, there's that echo of hope. Maybe if I prove I'm loyal, he'll stop testing me. Maybe then he'll love me right. But this is the trap. Because every time you jump through the hoops he sets, whether it's tolerating hot and cold behavior or accepting crumbs while calling it connection, you teach him how little it takes to keep you. And this is where the Jungian shadow awakens. For every man carries both the king and the wounded boy. And when you nurture the latter, hoping he will evolve into the former, you delay his becoming. You become his emotional caretaker rather than his equal. And a man cannot rise into his full masculine presence when he is held by a woman who sacrifices her dignity in hopes of earning his affection. So what do you do when you're being tested? You see it for what it is. You name the pattern. You stop internalizing his chaos and recognize it as his. You stop over-explaining, over-performing, and over-loving. You pause. You breathe. You choose stillness over scrambling. Because your loyalty is not a tool to be wielded against you. It is a gift, and it is sacred. The woman who knows her worth does not dance for clarity. She becomes the clarity. She does not prove her loyalty to a man who cannot hold his own heart. She embodies devotion first to herself, to her peace, to her purpose, to her emotional safety. She does not abandon herself in the name of understanding him. She understands patterns, not excuses. She loves, yes, but she also leaves when love begins to mirror war. And let us be clear, not all men test out of malice. Some do it because they have never witnessed a woman stand firm in her own center. They have only known love that chases, that begs, that dissolves under pressure. And when a woman stands in her wholeness, unshaken by their withdrawal, it terrifies them, but it also awakens them. This is the paradox. The man who tests your loyalty is often testing to see if you will lose yourself. And when you do not, when you refuse to trade your worth for his attention, something shifts. He is faced with a mirror that does not distort, a mirror that does not flatter nor condemn, but reflects the truth of who he has become. And in that reflection, some men break, others rise. And you become free. There is a moment, subtle, nearly imperceptible, when a woman begins to feel the ground shift beneath her feet. It does not come with thunder or warning. It arrives quietly. A missed call, a vague response, a delay in warmth that used to arrive like sunlight. And suddenly her intuition stirs like an ancient tide. He's pulling away. But what she feels beneath the surface is something even more potent. He is watching. He is measuring. He is testing. The distance is not just absence, it's design. When a man tests your loyalty, he is not simply observing your reactions. He is projecting his fears onto you, hoping, unconsciously, that you will fail him, that you will abandon him, betray him, or turn cold so that his inner story can be proven true. See, I was right not to trust love. In Jungian terms, this is the projection of the shadow, the parts of himself he cannot accept, now cast upon you like a distorted film. If he has not met his own fear of intimacy, your desire for closeness will feel invasive. If he has not held his own wound of rejection, your independence will feel like distance. The test then is not really about you. It is about whether you will mirror the pain he has refused to integrate. This is the tragedy of the unhealed masculine. He demands loyalty from the feminine, while withholding the very stability that earns it. He seeks the mother, not the partner. He wants to be held but not seen. He wants your devotion without offering the safety that devotion requires. And so he pokes. He withholds. He creates silence to see if you will fill it with your longing. You goddess that you are, feel the pull. You feel the ache in your belly when the texts stop arriving on time. You feel the tension when he becomes vague about his feelings. You feel the rage and sorrow when he becomes emotionally slippery, offering just enough to keep you invested, but never enough to feel secure. This is not an accident. It is a pattern, rehearsed and repeated through generations, of emotionally unavailable men and the women who mistake their confusion for passion. But hear this clearly. Your worth is not something to be earned by surviving emotional starvation. The moment you feel you must prove your value, you are no longer in love. You are in survival mode. And the female psyche, when pushed into survival, will perform. She will analyze every word. She will shrink her needs. She will become the ever-giving, ever-forgiving, ever-available presence in hopes that her stability will soothe his chaos. But this is the root of distortion. For when the feminine gives from emptiness, she loses herself. When she overextends to compensate for his emotional absence, she fractures her own soul. Loyalty is not the art of enduring uncertainty. It is not about waiting for clarity that never comes. Loyalty, in its divine form, is a mutual rising. Two souls meeting in honesty, not hiding in games. But the testing man is not playing for love. He is playing for power. And power dynamics, when rooted in insecurity, always turn poisonous. He may pretend to be casual, indifferent, detached, but beneath the surface, He is desperate for control. Control over your heart, your attention, your sense of self. Because if he can keep you unsure, he can keep you close. Not out of love, but out of confusion. This is where many women fall. They begin to internalize the test. They believe that if they were just more understanding, more patient, more perfect, the testing would stop. But this is not the path to love. This is the path to codependency, where your identity becomes entangled in the pursuit of proving your loyalty to a man who does not know how to receive it. You must understand, a man who truly values loyalty does not test it with neglect. He earns it with presence, and a woman who has done her shadow work will recognize the difference. She will no longer be seduced by the breadcrumbs of attention, the games of hot and cold. She will no longer mistake confusion for mystery. She will know that when love requires suffering to prove its strength, it is not love, it is trauma reenactment. Because beneath the surface of the loyalty test is often a deeper wound, the fear of abandonment. The testing man is terrified of being left, but equally terrified of being seen. And so he creates distance, hoping you will chase. If you chase, he feels temporarily validated. If you do not, he blames you for confirming his worst fear. It is a lose-lose trap, one that only collapses when you step outside of it. That is where your power lies. In not reacting, but observing. In not performing, but pausing. In not explaining your worth, but embodying it so fully that you need no defense. When a man tests your loyalty, he reveals more about himself than he does about you. He shows his unresolved pain, his distrust of the feminine, his fear of surrender. And while compassion is noble, self-abandonment is not. You do not need to bleed to prove that you care. You do not need to perform loyalty like a trained dancer on the stage of his indecision. Because here is the truth, the woman who remains loyal to herself first is the one who breaks the cycle. She sees the test, she feels the pull, but she does not lose herself in it. She stays rooted, she breathes deeper. She does not chase his ghost, she holds her ground and lets the wind pass through her. And when he sees that he cannot shake her foundation, something begins to shift. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but energetically. She has drawn a boundary that speaks louder than any words. I am not available for emotional warfare disguised as love. This is how healing begins. Not by fixing him, not by proving yourself, but by choosing peace over performance, truth over tension, self-respect over self-sacrifice. Because the woman who passes the loyalty test is not the one who stays no matter what. It's the one who walks away when the test itself becomes a betrayal. There comes a threshold, a place in the soul, where a woman can no longer tolerate the erosion of her dignity, even in the name of love. It is not always dramatic. It does not always announce itself. Often it is quiet, a deep internal knowing, a whisper from the ancient feminine, enough. And it is in this sacred moment that the test loses its power. The man who tests your loyalty, again and again, expecting you to bend, to contort, to prove, he is no longer holding the reins. Because you, woman of fire and depth, have reclaimed what was always yours, the right to choose yourself over confusion. But before this power emerges, many women wander through the fog. This fog is thick with projections, his, yours, collective. The woman begins to question herself. Am I too demanding? Am I not patient enough? Is loyalty about staying even when it hurts? And these questions, though natural, are not born from wisdom. They are born from wounds. Old wounds, generational. Echoes of mothers and grandmothers who were taught that love is earned through silence, through endurance, through staying small. Jung spoke of the anima, the inner feminine force within all humans, and how men project their inner feminine onto the women they love. When a man has not made peace with this inner anima, he does not seek a partner. He seeks a savior. He looks to her to complete him, heal him, forgive his absence before he's even named it. So when he tests your loyalty, what he is truly doing is placing the burden of his healing in your lap to see if you'll carry it for him. But you were not born to carry what was never yours. The empowered feminine does not confuse loyalty with martyrdom. She knows that the man who truly sees her would never make her prove her love through suffering. Because love in its mature form does not test, it reveals. And this is where the great undoing begins. When a woman wakes from the trance of proving, she begins to see clearly. She sees the patterns, how he withdraws just when things become emotionally real, how he pushes her buttons to trigger old insecurities, how he disappears to see if she will run after him. These are not acts of love, these are acts of fear disguised as power. He doesn't want to know if you're loyal. He wants to know if you'll stay despite yourself. Because if you do, it reassures him, not that you love him, but that he can control love without giving anything of depth in return. That he can remain unaccountable, emotionally elusive, perpetually wounded, and still be worshipped. This is the shadow of the masculine left unchecked. And your role is not to tame it, but to refuse to be consumed by it. Understand this. A man's loyalty test is not just a moment, it is a pattern. And patterns have purpose. They are designed to teach, to initiate, to reflect. Every time you endure this cycle, you are being asked, will you betray yourself, or will you rise into truth? Most women do not answer this question with clarity the first time. They love, they hope, they believe in potential. And that is not weakness. That is the echo of the divine feminine, who sees possibility in all beings. But when possibility becomes your prison, the feminine must become fierce. It is not cruel to walk away from a man who tests your heart without honoring it. It is not cold to stop chasing someone who retreats to punish your desire for closeness. It is not selfish to protect your emotional landscape from someone who scatters it with confusion. Because when a man truly values a woman, he does not create chaos to assess her worth. He creates order to honor it. The feminine is not meant to be dragged through trials. She is meant to be chosen, clearly, boldly, without hesitation. And anything less than that is not devotion. It is a distortion. There is a haunting phenomenon that happens when a woman stays too long in the test. Her body begins to tighten. Her joy begins to dim. Her radiance, that magnetic glow that flows from inner peace, begins to wither. Because loyalty, when misused, becomes a spiritual poison. And no amount of love can flourish in the soil of emotional instability. You must become your own mirror. Look at your reflection and ask, is this who I want to become? The woman who waits for breadcrumbs, or the woman who feasts at her own table? Because the loyalty he is testing is not about you. It is about him. His unresolved traumas, his unspoken fears, his inability to hold the feminine without needing to conquer it. And when you see that clearly, without rage, without blame, you become untouchable. Not because you are hard, but because you are whole. The man who tests you may never understand what he's lost when you choose yourself. He may never realize that the woman he pushed away was the very mirror he needed. But his recognition is not your responsibility. Your only task is this, to remain loyal to your truth. To speak when you want to hide. To walk when you want to beg. To rise when you want to shrink. Because in the end, loyalty that costs your voice, your dignity, your sanity is too expensive. And the woman who knows this becomes a force of nature. She does not beg for assurance. She does not seek permission to be loved. She does not fight for a seat at a table she was meant to walk away from. She becomes the embodiment of sovereignty. A woman who no longer proves, but simply is. And in that presence, she no longer fears the test. She dissolves it. There is something sacred in the breaking point. The exact moment when a woman stops, seeing his behavior as a reflection of her worth, and begins to understand it as a revelation of his character. It's not always explosive. Sometimes it comes like dawn, slow, inevitable, undeniable. She no longer aches for him to text first. She no longer refreshes the screen, hoping the silence will be replaced with presence. Something ancient inside her exhales. The test has ended, not because he chose differently, but because she did. This is what individuation feels like. The psychological process Jung called the journey of becoming whole. And it is here that she steps into the fire not to burn, but to be reborn. The woman who has endured his testing is no longer the same. She has seen her own longing. She has met the places inside her that once confused pain for proof of devotion. She has faced the haunting question, why do I stay where I am not fully seen? And in answering it, she does not blame herself. She reclaims herself. The man who tests your loyalty again and again often does not know he is afraid of intimacy. He only knows that when closeness grows, so does his need to pull away. He mistakes vulnerability for weakness, need for exposure, love for risk. So instead of stepping in, he withdraws. Just enough to unsettle you, to trigger your hunger for clarity. He may come back with soft eyes and empty words, or gifts without change, or even deeper silence wrapped in false calm. But the energy never lies. You feel the game before your mind can name it. And here is the truth. This is not about loyalty. This is about control. When a man creates emotional confusion to measure your reaction, he is not asking, will you love me? He is asking, can I control how much you love me, even when I give you less? Because if you give more when he gives less, you've been caught. You've entered the trap. And once you're there, every gesture becomes a performance. The over-explaining, the apologizing, the endless grace. Not because you are weak, but because you were raised to believe that love should hurt before it heals. But the mature feminine knows. Love is not supposed to hurt like this. It is not supposed to unearth your childhood wounds and leave them bleeding. It is not supposed to test your ability to survive absence and call it a relationship. That is not love, that is emotional debt, and the interest it accrues is your peace. He does not test you because he doubts your love. He tests you because he does not trust himself to be loved without condition. And so he recreates the very pain he once felt. The abandonment, the betrayal, the rejection, now as the one in control. It is his unconscious way of mastering his past. But the tragedy is that he's dragging you into it. You do not have to follow him there. You are not required to be the antidote to his wounds. You are not his therapist. You are not a reward to be earned after suffering. You are not here to pass tests disguised as love. You are here to embody love, to become it, radiate it, protect it fiercely from those who would drain it. The woman who has walked through these firestorms knows a different kind of strength. Not the strength to hold on, but the strength to let go. To stop proving. To stop defending. To stop chasing moments of warmth in a landscape of cold detachment. And when she does, when she truly stops, something miraculous happens. Her nervous system begins to settle. Her spirit begins to expand. The voice she once silenced now speaks in thunder. She no longer waits for him to choose her. She chooses herself. Not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of remembrance. She remembers who she was before she twisted herself into a shape that would make her easier to love. She remembers the woman who did not question her instincts. She remembers that her loyalty is sacred, and only those who honor it deserve to receive it. There will be men who do not understand this, who say she changed, that she became cold, that she used to be softer. But these men confuse compliance with kindness. They remember her bending, not her breaking. And when she stops bending, they call it betrayal. Let them. Because the woman who rises from the test is not bitter. She is clear. And clarity to the man who thrives in ambiguity feels like rejection. But it is not rejection. It is revelation. She sees now. She sees how each test was never about truth, but about control. She sees how every time she proved her loyalty, she was losing pieces of herself. She sees that real love does not require sacrifice of self, but expansion of self. And from that vision, she begins to attract differently. Not the man who plays games, but the man who shows up. Not the man who withholds to feel powerful, but the man who gives because it is his nature. A man who is no longer at war with his inner feminine, and so does not punish you for expressing yours. This man does not test, he trusts. because he trusts himself. But you do not wait for him. You do not hope for him. You do not delay your healing on the chance he may evolve. You become the evolution, and this is what terrifies the man who still tests. That one day, you will no longer respond. That his silence will be met with yours. That his withdrawal will echo into emptiness. That you will no longer be moved by the dance of his uncertainty. That you will stop answering the question, will you stay no matter what I do? With anything but no. This is not cruelty. This is grace. The kind of grace that says, I am done offering myself to your unhealed wounds. I am done proving that I am worthy of love by surviving your absence. I am done passing a test that should never have been given. Because the woman who has risen into clarity no longer fears being alone. She fears instead the betrayal of her own soul. And so she guards it, not with walls but with standards. In the end, there is no grand explosion, no cinematic confrontation, no desperate final plea. There is only stillness, the kind that comes after the storm has passed, and you realize the most powerful thing you ever did was nothing. You didn't chase. You didn't beg. You didn't try to decode the silence or soften your truth to remain lovable. You simply stopped dancing in someone else's shadow. And this, more than anything, is what ends the test. Because a man cannot test what no longer reacts. He cannot measure what no longer bends. The game collapses when you walk away from the board. Not in anger, but in sovereignty. The woman who has made peace with herself no longer sees love as something to be earned. She does not mold herself into palatable shapes to fit into half-hearted hearts. She does not stand in the cold hoping. He'll invite her into the warmth. He keeps locked away. She builds her own fire. She lights her own path. The man who once watched her through the lens of suspicion now finds that he no longer knows how to reach her. Because she is no longer proving, pleading, performing. She has withdrawn her energy, her essence, her light. Not out of punishment, but out of wisdom. This is the woman who has done the deep work, the shadow work. She has met her own hunger to be chosen and questioned its source. She has faced the little girl in her who thought love was something to be earned through endurance. And she has offered her a new story. You do not have to ache to be worthy. She has seen how the loyalty test was not about love, but about insecurity. She has realized that his withholding, his silence, his push-pull pattern, it was not a reflection of her value, but of his inability to hold closeness without feeling powerless. And she does not hate him for it. She simply no longer sacrifices herself in an attempt to heal what only he can face. This woman has stopped asking why he does it. She has stopped psychoanalyzing his childhood, interpreting his wounds, waiting for potential to become presence. She has stopped playing therapist to a man who refuses to see his own reflection. Because the woman, who is loyal to herself, knows that emotional labor without reciprocity is not intimacy, it's depletion. So she reclaims her time, she reclaims her joy, she reclaims her intuition. That primal compass that always knew when something was off, even before her mind tried to rationalize it. And with this reclamation comes a softness, not the softness of submission, but the softness of strength. The softness that says, I am not hard because I'm angry. I am soft because I'm free, free from confusion, free from cycles, free from the need to prove love through suffering. Because when you reach this place, something radical happens. You no longer need closure. You are no longer waiting for him to understand what he lost. You are no longer hoping he evolves just enough to finally see you. You have already seen yourself, fully, fiercely, finally. And you understand that the test was never really about him. It was about you. Would you choose yourself, even when staying felt easier? Would you rise, even when crawling felt safer? Would you protect your peace, even when chaos was disguised as passion? This is the path of the feminine in her power. Not the woman who wins the man, but the woman who wins herself. Not the one who stays in the name of loyalty, but the one who redefines loyalty altogether as something rooted, first in the self, then in love that mirrors it. And now, from this space of clarity, you no longer fear walking alone. Because alone no longer means abandoned. Alone now means aligned. You walk in silence, not because there is nothing to say, but because peace speaks louder than persuasion. You let go, not because you stopped loving, but because love, real love, cannot survive in a space where trust must constantly be proven through pain. The man who tested you may continue to test others, or he may awaken, startled by your absence, shaken by the realization that he mistook your love for weakness. And maybe one day he will rise, but you will not wait, because you, goddess of self-worth and shadow light, are no longer standing in the waiting room of someone else's readiness. You have become the love you were once desperate to receive. You have become the anchor, the fire, the unwavering stillness in a world full of storms. And if, someday, a man comes who does not test you, but meets you, you will know. You will know by the way he does not retreat when things become real. You will know by the way your nervous system rests in his presence. You will know by the way your inner child doesn't flinch in his arms. You will know because it will feel like home, not like a battlefield. But until then, and even after, you do not dim your light in hopes of being chosen. You are no longer here to be chosen. You are here to choose peace over pattern, to choose your truth over his test, to choose yourself again and again and again, until every cell in your body remembers that love does not demand proof. It demands presence, and the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses. If this message stirred something deep within you, if you felt seen, understood, or awakened in any way, don't let the journey stop here. Subscribe now and step into a space where the sacred feminine rises, where psychology meets empowerment, and where we unravel the games, the wounds, and the patterns together. Here, we don't just talk about love. We decode it. We don't chase validation. We reclaim our worth. So if you're ready to heal deeper, rise higher, and never settle for less than the love you deserve, hit subscribe and become part of a movement where your voice, your power, and your soul are never tested, only celebrated.